Okay, so let's take a look at how you might build a custom template that you can use with shapes that are ready to accept some data. So as you build out a process, you're filling in certain data fields, and then also how to build maybe a custom header and do some sort of calculations here. So what I have here is I've got a document that I've already started doing some things with. So the first thing that I did was I went into File and Page Settings, and I actually set I turned off auto tiling. I set my page size because I was like, I didn't really want this to auto grow. And I'm just in a blank document here that I started to customize. I also dragged out just a normal shape and I started turning it into a nice header shape here. So I used some dynamic insert fields like the document name, the page name, last modified date and time. So these things will name process update as I add them. And I also locked this in style, size, and position, but I left content open in case I wanted to add anything. So I have my document here. And one of the things that I initially did was drag out a shape and start setting some default styles. So typically the default style is just, a white box. It looks a little bit like this. And when I hover, you'll see my default styles here. But it would just be kind of a white box with a line. I took away the line color. I made it a light gray instead of white. I bolded the text. I also made my line a little bit thicker. And in order to set these as my default styles, I right-clicked and I said Set Default Style. I did the same exact thing for lines. So that means that every single, shape that I add out here is going to reflect those styles that I have. Now, I also did something else fun. I took a process shape like this, and I opened up this data panel over here on the right-hand side. And instead of layout, I chose data, and I started adding data fields. So I added things like step. I added step number. I added assignee, and I added time. These fields were all, just empty and ready to be filled in. The only thing I did say was, enter step here, and I inserted that text and got rid of the word process. So that way, it's just going to display whatever it is that when I click on the shape, fill in the step, it would actually display that on there. So as someone starts to drag out and use this shape, they can just fill in everything they want over here. I then actually saved this as a custom shape by adding it to my custom shape library. How did I do that? Well, I closed out some of the other libraries that were just in the blank document by clicking the X, and then I clicked the plus shape library button, and I came into my libraries, and I clicked this plus new to get a new library. You can rename it then from here. You check the box to get it added to your panel on the left. You can rename the shapes, so I could actually rename this something if I wanted to. I can delete them. I can share this with my teammates so that they can use this library in the template. And I have it ready to go for people to use over here. So you can see actually my custom shape, it looks a lot like the one I just made, and it's ready to be used. So when someone were to come in and maybe start using this template, they could come in and they could just start building out their shape, and they'd be able to just use kind of this special process shape ready to go. There's another thing that I did here though, and that was go ahead and start to add some conditional formatting rules. Conditional formatting, when you add a new rule, you want to make sure that you try to add it to everything or just to the select shapes you want to apply to based on what you're choosing. And you can basically set it up to look at that shape data. So I could say I want to look at something like, in this case, it was time. And if it's not empty, then I want to display maybe a specific type of icon, like a text badge. And I could come in and even say, pull the text from, that specific area, and it would then display on my shapes that have a time. So if I come in and add a time here, you'll notice that that's going to appear. Now I already had a rule there, so I'm going to delete it, the extra one that I just made here. And let's take a look at my time rule. So rather than just doing something basic like time is not empty, I actually set an if-else condition. So I said, in this case, if time is less than or equal to 15, then my dot should be blue, and it should just go ahead and display the time value like 6. However, else if it is greater than 15, then that background or that badge should be bright red. It's pulling the same data, the time, and it's going to look very similar. However, if I set the time to be something like 67, then suddenly we're going to see it turn red instead of blue. So we have a nice conditional formatting there. The other rule is actually going to apply to specifically this shape up here. So this is a little group shape, and let's talk about how I made the shape, and then we'll come back to the rule. So I went in and I searched using the little icon for dynamic shape, and I pulled out this little progress donut here. Like out of my group shape. So I pulled out this little progress donut, and then I also pulled out a text field. And what I did was I actually selected both. I did a right click and I grouped them. Creating a group shape means they'll move together. It also means I could put data at kind of that level and reference it within the smaller shape. So I added an expected time. Ooh, how to spell expected, right? And I added a total time. So whoever is filling in this template might fill in an expected time. Let's just say it's 50 minutes. And the total time, though, is going to be adding up the total time on the page. So I'm going to say children of page, and that's going to give me all the shapes on the page. But really, I'm going to use dot notation to access the only thing I care about, which is their time property. And that's going to give me, technically, it would give me a list of all shapes on the page that have a time. And you'll notice here that now it's a list of a bunch of 6s because I have 4 shapes that all have a time. And what I really want from this, though, is to sum it up. So I'm going to get my total time on the canvas. And that's added to my group shape. So how do I get this to then apply into these little shapes in the group as this one is? So I would double click on my group, and I could click on the individuals that I want to change. So I'll start with my little pie. And I'm going to set the maximum here to be equal to parent, because it's inside a group, so I can reference the shape at that level. And I'm going to say parent dot expected time. So I expect it to be no more than 50. And my value is going to be equal to parent dot total time. So I'm going to see how close am I to reaching the expected total time as I'm building this process. Then I'm going to say, I'm going to double click on that text field and say total time. And I want to then throw in that same thing. So I'm going to, I like to make properties here and just put that in. So I'll have this say equals parent dot total time, and I could have just copied that formula. Then I'll just insert that text there and minutes. There is one other way you could do this. You could click on this, and you could actually just insert any formula you want here by doing double curly brackets equals. Put in 42, answered everything. So you can actually edit formulas there as well. Personally, I like to have a record of just what properties I'm using. So that's kind of a personal preference as you build. And I'm just going to make this so it fits nicely inside my little square. And I am all set. So I can actually leave my group. I could just click page, I could press escape, or I could just double click the white space on the canvas. And now I have my little thing that I built out that lives up in the corner. And it's this one. Remember earlier I said I had a formatting rule? The one other thing I did was I selected just this little pie shape. So you'll see that suddenly this rule pops into applied to selection. And I created a rule specific to this. And I actually used a formula rule rather than shape data. And I said equals this dot value is greater than this dot max. So again, we're using that dot notation to access fields on the shape. And this is just a reference to whatever shape we're currently on. So I'm saying, okay, if the value is greater than max, then I want this maybe not to get an icon, but to get a shape style. And I want it to turn bright red. And what will happen here is, let's say, increase the time. It's just 7. Suddenly you'll see it turns bright red if we go over that threshold. So that is how that rule is working. And let me get rid of my extra rule here. So I have my conditional formatting rules all set. I set my default styles. I have my cool little calculator here. I could have done a couple other things. I could have been showing things like averages. I could have been, counting it up based on assignees. I could be calculating based on a couple other things here. This is just sort of a basic example. And I'm going to go ahead and clear this template out now that I have my custom shape added and saved in the shape library, rules set up, my header, everything's ready to go. I could then come in and say File, Convert to Template, and save this as a flowchart template and roll it out to my team.